Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tammy Reger and I am a higher self alchemist. Before I forget, if you are enjoying my content, please subscribe to this channel and like this content so that my content gets out to more people. Today, I want to talk about something about time that many people either don't understand or sometimes it kind of blows people's minds. And that is, are you from the future? Now, we in this life have been taught that time is linear and that we will eventually pass in this lifetime and when we would move on to some future time. In the quantum universal space, there's that idea of linear time is non-existent and actually didn't even exist on Earth until potentially the Industrial Revolution. And that was when they invented clocks, and where things started to be timed to the hour or the minute or so forth and so things. Those are all man-made constructs. They did not exist. We existed time by the sun, um, uh, as an example. And so beyond this artificial idea of time in the 3D, we also have this sometimes forgotten energy when we look at, when I look at energetic trauma from a higher self's perspective. You may be from the future. And even when you pass in this lifetime, you may go back to ancient Egypt or Lemuria or Atlantis or even Jesus' time. We do not move through time and space linearly. Your conscious experience may actually be in what we deem the past next time around, or it could be in the future. But this, I want to really talk about why there's so many of us here from the future and the now. And it's because there are a lot of timelines available or have been in the future that were awful. If you haven't heard in some of my other videos, I've talked about how in order for there to be a rebirth, we have to go through this destruction cycle, which is part of the divine feminine energy. We go through the destruction cycle and then we allow the energy that's been decomposed back into the energy of the universe to be then used to create new. And many of us hold ourselves back, especially as women, because we're afraid of that destruction energy. And we may have had lives where that destruction energy has hurt people in the past. If that's you, you need to work through it because this destruction energy is part of the cycle of life and how the universe works energetically. There's this energy of deconstruction, or what's otherwise known as dissension, and then we allow the new to come in, okay, with rebirth. But many of us are from the future because there are tweaks that needed to be done or could be done during this current timeline that then would make the transition to this new, so let's say Age of Aquarius, in the future easier for us, but as a collective unified space as well. There's timelines of war, Earth getting destroyed, famine, just suffering. I've worked with enough clients where I've seen some of the stuff that's come up with the future. You don't have to know a lot of detail about it. It's just really about clearing it. And well, why would you want to clear it? I'll talk about that in a moment. Well, let's first talk about why else you would be here right now, and why so many people have chosen to come now. This time and space, this, I don't know, 100 years, depending on, how long you lived, let's say 75 to 100 years, is a pivotal point in your higher self's development for a future experience. And there are things that your higher self wanted to either learn during this time that would help that transition to new, or there are things that needed to be healed let's say past or ancestrally, that would help you be able to manifest a different future or move to a timeline where that doesn't exist. Now, some of these timelines have already collapsed because so many people have been doing work. Just working on the past can collapse some of those. Those don't have to exist anymore. But when you do the work on yourself and you heal wherever it comes from, right? Or if you heal the future trauma, if you have future trauma where you lost all your money or you lost your home or there was war and all this stuff, that trauma is in your cells. It's in your DNA. So even though you have no idea what it is, your cells know. And this could also be future this timeline, meaning this life, or it could be future next life or third life or whatever it is. But your cells don't know time. Your DNA doesn't know time. So anything that's happened to you, whether it's quote unquote past or in the future, is in your DNA, and it's set up as, in this case, when we talk about energetic trauma, it's set up as a safeguard, a fence, in order for you to try to get yourself to avoid whatever those events are in the future. And in my clients and myself, I'm finding that many of us hold ourselves back from following our breadcrumbs, doing the things we're called to, because in some future life or even this life, we've lost it or it's caused us pain and suffering. So we're trying to avoid it. The way is not around. You have to go through it. So when you're struggling with something and you can't seem to get why it keeps reoccurring, especially if it's something like fear or anger, I really want you to look at the future. Are you from the future? And you can ask your pendulum if you are from the future, it will tell you. And many of us are here from the future to tweak, to heal, to learn something that we can apply to the past, heal the timeline so that we can align to a new timeline where this transition to the age of Aquarius is easier, faster. It doesn't, remember, there's no such thing as time in, as we know, in this linear aspect in the quantum field, in the universe. That timeline already exists and we could shift to it now. So when you talk about, many talk about in the age of Aquarius, you know, it's 2035 or 2038. That's a man-made construct and linear time. In the quantum universe, that does not exist. It can happen faster, but it requires you, each of us, to work within ourselves to heal the wounds that would prevent it from going faster. Now, there may be still steps, right? Like, let's say you clear something that's preventing like the 2035 date from happening sooner. But there may be still soul development or time, universal time. This is that divine timing stuff has to happen before that can happen. But you're aligned to that energy, so it can happen faster. And we're each going to get to those milestones that many people have put out in the spiritual space about what happens in 2035, 38, 40, so forth, so on. Our own time. You are your own time bubble. You get to choose how this happens. And you do that by doing the inner work, right? You heal the future as well as the past, ancestrally, in this life as well. You choose to experience a surrender to the universe to show you how you can get there faster. That timeline of whatever 2035 is, and I don't really follow all that stuff, so I don't know, can happen now. It can happen in this life, because all it takes for you to attune to that frequency. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. It's, you know, depending on how the shifts are. In my last video, I talked about how this eclipse window is a quantum leap. Well, that's part of this shifting to a new timeline where love has won. And that's where I know that's where I'm going, only because that's what I keep hearing in my head. And we can all do this. We don't have to wait for a certain year to happen, or a certain month to happen, or a certain day to happen. Those things can happen now. There is no time. This idea of something happening in the future, 20, 35, 40, whatever it is a man-made construct. And if you're from the future, you've already lived that. Potentially. But or if not that specifically, this 20, 38, 40 thing, a timeline in the future after that. The frequency of that already exists within you. But in order for us to get there, to be able to get to this new timeline of this love has won energy now, you have to do the work within yourself as to why you can't be there. And it's just a frequency change, like a dial on a radio. I know they don't have those anymore, but trying to think of other things that have dials. That's just the oven, okay, right? Or something where you have to tune. A guitar or a piano still needs to be tuned. It's like, how do you get your music to play properly so that all of the notes are in alignment, the strings are strong and taut. And when you play that new tune piano, guitar, it has an entirely different symphony of sound. And that symphony of sound is what then magnetically connects you to a new timeline. And that timeline shift into your reality may be a day, it may take a month, but you're still there. So ask if you're from the future. I find it really important right now. There's a lot of drumming of fear and anger around and chaos, right? And some of that is because of future events, and your higher self is getting you to remember those future events so that you can clear it, so you can get on a timeline where that doesn't have to happen. If you believe something has to happen outside yourself before you can have love as one, then you should look at that, because nothing outside of yourself is real. It's an illusion. It's what you have created or aligned to collectively. You have the power. You have the power to shift whatever that is to get to that timeline after that, where all that suffering and struggle and violence doesn't have to happen. You have that power within you to do so. But it starts with you understanding you're from the future. I've never asked this, but I guess you could ask how many future lives you've had. That is something you can do, but that's more of a brain thing, so I wouldn't worry about that. Instead, I would ask, am I from the future? And are there timelines in the future where I suffered, or my family suffered, that I have trauma from, that is preventing me from remembering who I really am and doing what I'm here to do? And then when that happens, a lot of this pent-up anxiety some of us have, or worry, been there, totally get it, anger, goes away, because it's only being driven by these future events that we ourselves don't remember. Your conscious self only knows this time. And while you can look in the past, say ancient Egypt and Lemuria, you can get there. We have the words to describe it. But in the future, I find that that's sometimes harder to do. And I always hear it doesn't matter, because the future hasn't technically been written yet. It has already been changed as you made choices in this life. Whatever your soul's mission or purpose was in this life has changed the future. So your future self doesn't just change by you healing. It changes because you are consciously controlling your choices, your where your focus is. Like, what are you focusing on? Are you focusing more on what's not working than what's working? Because those all things generate what your future life would look like when you manifest in that future life. So as we go through this transition, in this jump we're going through with this graduation energy that came up in the last video I did, what needs to be healed that you've experienced in the future that are causing your cells to be like this? It's because there's something in the future, whether it could be this timeline, and I'll give you an example of something that happened to me, meaning this life, or it could be in the future, where you're just bracing. And when you release that energetic trauma from this future, you heal that, you relax and you come more back into the now, and you're able to move easier in this lifetime. Several years ago, I don't remember what it was. I don't remember when it was exactly. But my brother had come for Thanksgiving. We went to the Bronx Botanical Garden in New York, in the Bronx. And on the way home, I somehow got the flu. And I had the flu for like 10 days. And in that period of time, my husband contracted RSV. And because I hadn't recovered from the flu, I got RSV. So I ended up being sick for like 5 weeks, and it would not go away. Like the RSV cough would just not go away. And in January, in frustration, I was just like, what the freak is going on? I think it was like 2022, I don't know. And when I asked, I heard it's because of your experience and other lives and what happens in that year. So there was this idea, if I was sick, I didn't have to either suffer through it or have to do it, or it would take me out of it somehow, or I wouldn't be here, so I wouldn't have to go through it, whichever way. And once I worked through what that future stuff was that was causing my body to respond in this not so great way of keeping myself sick with RSV or flu or whatever, I was able to, it went away. I was using it as a distraction, so I didn't have to fully plug into the new year. So this was like a January timeframe. And that's an example of how the future can mess with us, these future traumas. And again, we don't have to know what they are. And I initially got it because I wasn't resting. Happens to all of us. It's like, you're not listening, so now you're forced to, right? But whenever I get into those patterns where something's happening that I just can't seem to break, it's okay, what am I doing to myself? Like, I'm doing this to myself. Why? And it's sometimes in the past, but a lot of time it's in the future. Okay. So I'm going to blow your mind even more. Okay. And this is where people really go, what? Not only are you potentially from the future, but you may have already lived this timeline more than once. And again, you can ask your pendulum. I am on round 4 with this timeline. And I have some clients that haven't lived this timeline before, and there's others that have less or more. And I would say that you have lived other timelines multiple times. And the reason is, again, is there was something else that your higher self wanted to experience this during this time. Maybe make a different choice, have a different experience during this time, or there was something it wanted to be here for. And I know through my own work and understanding the timeline thing with me during this time, is that there are certain things that need to be healed to avoid certain events. And thankfully that has happened this time. So I don't think we're quite through the thing, but that's where I am. So if you have lived this lifetime more than once, that doesn't mean that you died and then reincarnated in this timeline. You might have reincarnated somewhere in the future in the past and then come back. How that all works is really up to your higher self and source. You can ask, why am I repeating this? Is it something that needs to be healed? Or is it just because my higher self wanted another experience during this time? If that's the case, then there's not really anything that you can do about it. It's just, that's how this happens. There's certain things that are changing on Earth during this time that your higher self finds expansive and fun, growth period. And that's going to be true of other lifetimes that you've gone back to. And it's important to know, only because, again, if there's something that's causing you to repeat this that isn't helping you expand and grow, then there's healing work to be done. 1. 2, sometimes some of us have karmic contracts with parents, siblings, friends that are causing us to reincarnate at certain timelines, not because we necessarily want to, but because in order for those contracts to be lived out as they're supposed to be, when that person incarnates, you have to come to. That's something that definitely happens, and I see that quite a bit, where something happened in a past life, and whether you said something to somebody or the other person said, like, I'll haunt you forever. Well, forever doesn't end at the end of that lifetime. And then what happens is whenever you reincarnate or that other person reincarnates, you have to come to, or the other person has to come to, in order to fulfill that vow or contract. You can ask whether you have any of those with this timeline, and if you do, you can clear those. If you need help, you can sign up for a session. This is the stuff I help with. I help you clear the stuff in the future that's preventing you from being who you're supposed to be in this, and to graduate on this level. What's up in the way of you graduating between these eclipses? What's preventing you from fully opening, expanding your energetic body to the universe instead of it being clamped down? All the things, past life, future, ancestral, it doesn't really matter. And getting you to really remember who you are and really how powerful you are. So powerful, but so much trauma has been happening on this planet, going back to at least Atlantis, where we've got ourselves all tied up. And you have the ability to get out of it. You have it within you to do it. You need help, you find yourself struggling, schedule a session. Let's do it. But back to the future. You are a time traveler. Your higher self time travels. And even though you're only consciously aware of this timeline in the now, know that you may have come from other times, in the past, in the future, from another dimension, really from anywhere. And it's only when we think linearly that we get ourselves into trouble. And we have the ability to access those future energies now, once we've done the clearing, and we can vibrate at that level of that new frequency of, say, love has won. Okay, so if you have any questions about this, want some clarity around the future or even this timeline, drop them below and let me know what you think. But that's it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.